Hi, this is Steve from Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed, here to bring you a review of a brand new class for the Pathfinder 2nd edition done by Attune-A-Wizard Press, which is actually a conversion of a 1st edition Pathfinder class that has been retooled to function in 2nd edition. The class in question is the Inquisitor. Now, for those of you who don't know, and for those who haven't played Pathfinder 1st edition, the Inquisitor was a character class that came out relatively early when some of the new character books were coming out for 1st edition. And it was an amalgamation of several different concepts kind of rolled into one. It was similar to your holy warriors like paladins and clerics, but on the more edgier, more rule-breaky side of things, to make sure that the people who followed their god's tenets were actually doing what the gods intended. And if they weren't, woe be those who were breaking the tenets of their god, because the Inquisitor would not be too far behind. So before I go any further, I'd like to let you know about the relationship that Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed has with the Attune-A-Wizard Press company. So when we were first getting into the idea of starting a Wrath of the Righteous game, which is a first edition adventure path, but we're playing it in 2nd edition. Some of our players, since it is a lot about fighting demons, and paladins and clerics are kind of like second nature in that regard sometimes, one of our members of our team here wanted to play something that was similar to a paladin or a champion now, but she had played a champion previously, but she just came off of running a druid, so she didn't want to play a full caster like a cleric, and the oracle really wasn't matching with what she had in mind for her character. And when she kept saying like, oh, I want my character to be this certain way, Jared, Fabio, and I, who had played a lot of 1st edition, we each played Inquisitors in actually very different ways, and we all really enjoyed the class, and we actually were hoping that the class would come out at some point. But there's one thing that was lacking in 2nd edition was like a holy warrior book. A book that has a lot of different options for playing your clerics and paladins, but also playing other holy type warriors and holy type characters where they follow a god, but they also do it in their own unique way. So us remembering our fun of having played the Inquisitor class, we kind of mentioned this to our team member who wanted to play this character, Tina, who wanted to play this kind of not really cleric, not really paladin, not really oracle kind of class, and said, man, we had so much fun. So we were actually going to just kind of develop it ourselves and kind of see how it went. And I think some of this conversation happened while we were streaming one day, and one of the members of the Attune-A-Wizard Press company was messaging back and forth with this, and we kind of started having a conversation, and they said that, oh, by the way, they do have a company that does publish third-party products. And so we kind of started a dialogue back and forth and decided to commission them to make this class. Now, beyond that relationship and the fact that this was created, Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed isn't actually gaining any profits from this. There may be some chance that we might be able to give away a couple of free copies of this. We're still kind of in the works with that, but we're not making any money off of the actual sale of this book. We just thought it was a cool idea, and the publishing company just wanted to be able to put it out there, so they can get paid for their work. And kind of like there was discussions between Jared and I and the Attune-A-Wizard Press about like kind of partly the feel, which is more Jared's purview, and also from my perspective, I very much know the rules. So the kind of rule side of the how the mechanics worked in 1st edition to how they really work in 2nd edition, and kind of how we can get a similar mechanical feel as well as a similar play and role play feel for this new attuned Inquisitor. So just to give a little bit of backstory on the Inquisitor in 1st edition, the Inquisitor 1st edition was very much a mix of several different classes. Like I said, they cast like a sorcerer, so they cast spontaneously. So they have a limited number of spells that they can cast, but they cast off of the cleric list. But they also had a lot of abilities that let them hunt down specific types of monsters. Anytime they want to identify a monster, they would have bonuses to that. And they would also have this special ability later on in levels to be able to empower their weapon to specifically damage that type of enemy. And they also, one of the major points of their playstyle is they would, during combat, cast a judgment. And this would be a special ability that they would have that would power them with one of a variety of different judgments that would give them either pluses to their armor class to make them harder to hit, increases to their saving throws to make them harder, less susceptible to dangerous magic. They would have something that sometimes it would increase their to hit value, so it would be easier to hit their enemies. They would also have a judgment to be able to do more damage, but they would only be able to choose one of these at a time. And as you get higher levels, some of these bonuses would actually increase, and some of the and as you get really high in levels, you would be able to have multiple of these judgments up at any given time. So it was kind of like a lot of different things thrown into them. As well as and there's always going to be player options and archetypes and stuff like that. That was in first edition, but that was really the kind of the feel. It was kind of like more like this, like if you took a half paladin, half cleric, and threw Batman in there somewhere, and then you would have like this investigative, almost like investigator with holy magic, and always fighting for the tenets of their deity. So like I said, we always thought this was a cool idea, and now we have a version of it for second edition. Like I said, this is not sponsored by Paizo. This is something that this company and Nothing Ventured, Nothing Game kind of just worked together on a little bit. And yeah, let's get right into it. So one of the things that I had mentioned when we had discussed this concept to make this class is that second edition at the moment, and even at this point in this recording, because we had finished this a little while ago. But the one thing that we mostly all, even if we didn't play holy characters, through most of the knowledge I have in all the different books and people that I've talked to and had discussions about Pathfinder second edition, they really haven't come out with a book yet that really focuses on the divine as a whole. They have the Secrets of Magic book, which kind of delves into magic as a whole, and it talks about divine and all the 4 different types of magic that's in second edition. So you have divine, arcane, holy, and primal. But they don't really go into too much detail on any one of those kind of specialties. And back in first edition, they did have books that focus on specifically martial characters and kind of like the primal characters like barbarians and druids. And then they had other books that focus purely on martial and then purely on divine and the sorcerers and the wizards. So they each have their own book to kind of delve into their own lore. And that's something that we haven't seen yet besides that Secrets of Magic book. So some people who want to play some of these more divine focused characters, but kind of been lacking in the realm of like lore and how like the understanding of. So the cool thing about this product is that not only did they give you the class in and of itself, they included the multi-class archetype, but they also included holy style backgrounds. And I know we have holy style backgrounds in some other books, but it was nice inclusion here to like, if you really want to focus in to a particular type of background, because you want to be a church historian and you get some benefits for that, or you wanted to be excommunicated, which is actually uncommon, or you wanted to be a false prophet and be kind of like a little, like dealing under the table a little bit, or being a holy warrior. So they included a couple of the backgrounds to kind of help spur your imagination on to how you either play this character or how you play another divine-based character, or a character that may have come from a church or some sort of religious organization or sect. And maybe you're not playing a religious character, but you're playing a character that started there. So it's a nice inclusion to that. And there was obviously there's going to be all new Inquisitor Feeds. And this is very much, as you're going to see, I'm going to show a couple of things on my screen here. You're going to see that this is very much in the same style and formatting as you're going to be familiar with if you looked at any of the other Pathfinder second edition classes. So you start off with expert in perception, which is kind of similar to what they would be in first edition, even though perception was its own skill in first edition. The idea that they identify certain monsters and certain types, that's mostly knowledge checks, but they can also suss out some lying and some falsehoods with their perception. So that kind of goes hand in hand with their character archetype. They start with trained in fortitude and reflex saves, and they're expert in will saves. Yet again, kind of focuses on that they have that the willpower to resist those mind affecting abilities. They're trained in religion, which is pretty standard. They have things like different rackets for thieves. The Inquisitor has things called callings, and we're going to get into that a little later on kind of what that means. But they get a skill based on the calling they choose. They're going to get trained in religion, and they're going to get trained in a number of skills plus their intelligence modifier. They're trained in simple and martial weapons, which kind of pulls in that martial kind of side of being a paladin or champion, where that they've trained with weapon before, and they're not afraid to use some pretty meaty weapons. They're also trained in unarmed, like all characters are trained. They're trained in light and medium armor, similar to kind of like clerics, and I know paladins and champions are trained in heavy armor as well. But this kind of pulls back to the fact that they're spreading their knowledge base a little farther than the paladin, but not quite as far as the cleric, because the cleric is more laser focused in their god and religion as a whole. And the Inquisitor wants to kind of spread out their knowledge, so they're not going to spend as much time training in armor. They're also trained in divine spells and divine spell and their class DC, which is their divine spell DC. So the idea of an Inquisitor, even from first edition and what was tried to be maintained in this edition, in this version, the second edition version of the Inquisitor, is the fact that a paladin or a cleric has to strictly adhere to what their gods want them to follow. But sometimes that's makes it hard for the paladin or the cleric to get inside an organization and really stop it. So a paladin can take out a whole bunch of cultists, but the organization of itself still exists. And the organization is still going to do the bad things that the paladin and the cleric wanted to stop. So the Inquisitor, they kind of want to break it apart from the inside. They want to know how it functions and who the really important players are. And they're willing to do not nice things to be able to kind of be a wolf in sheep's clothing, to really try to get inside the organization or get inside and get really close to what really the problem is. It could be that high level cleric that was once a follower of your god and now is trying to corrupt it. Or it could be a band of cultists, but the cultists really don't know what's going on. But the one ringmaster, that's the one person you really need, but they keep themselves quite hidden. So you have to get inside the organization and maybe work for the organization for a limited time to be able to suss out who is actually at fault. And you take on that one piece, you take on that big keystone, and the structure would collapse upon itself. So that's the idea of an Inquisitor, is willing to do the bad things to be able to make sure that the good things get done. So to represent this, when a normal character is following a god and they have to pick one for their class, you have to follow the anthema of that deity. So that deity is going to have things that they don't want you doing, and it's kind of like they grant you power on the condition of you don't break these X amount of rules. The Inquisitor, and the fact that how they follow their god, sometimes has to break their anathema with their god or their deity because they're trying to do the greater good. So the Inquisitor has some special rules based on how well they've trained their religion, how often they can bend or break the anathema of a god and still be following that god in pursuit of their ultimate goal of stopping whatever bad thing is happening. So they're granted a special skill feat. Like I said, that's also included in this product that allows them to, every once in a while, take an action that would normally be an anathema to their deity. And so the first frequency, so they get this at first level, and the frequency is once a month. So once a month, you're allowed to do something that you're not supposed to do. You kind of have to take a moment. It's a 2-action activity. You got to take a moment and kind of focus yourself and say, oh, this is my one time. And you're allowed to do something that you know, to keep your cover going, whether that may mean you have to do something bad, or you have to like lie and cheat or steal or do something to kind of keep everything on the up and up, so you can get deeper into that organization and do what is necessary. The interesting thing is it's tied to your religion training. So as you get higher and higher training proficiency in your religion, you can do this more and more often, because most likely more situations are going to come up that you're going to have to break your tradition. Yet again, a lot of this is also based on like you and the GM kind of working together to some degree and saying like, hey, look, you know, my character's doing this and they're kind of inside this evil organization and I'm trying to get the whole party through. And well, look, we have to bribe some people. Maybe that's against my god. So I'm going to spend my one use here. Or maybe maybe we have to beat up somebody to kind of prove our loyalty. So it all depends on the discretion of you and the DM about how far that goes and how far the DM wants it to go, and also how comfortable the other players are. So just keep that in check. But it's really interesting and kind of pulls the same feel that the first edition one had in their description of bending the rules to make sure that that you know the bad guys are really stopped. So the next thing we're going to go over is spell casting. So the Inquisitor uses the similar spellcasting system that we saw back in Secrets of Magic called the bounded spellcasting system. So at most, the Inquisitor is going to have 4 spell slots, but they cast similar to how the Summoner casts. They cast spontaneously. So it's not like the Magus where they have a list of spells in their book. They don't have a spell book. They cast Divine. So they just kind of granted their spells, but they only know so many spells. And as they get higher and higher level, they're going to effectively lose some of their lower level spells and low level spell slots. Like I said, only ever maintaining 4 spell slots and all the requirements that come with the bounded spellcasting system. They were also given a stance. This is kind of how they activate their judgment. Now, judgment used to be, in first edition, used to be a special power that the Inquisitor could only use every once in a while. They had a number of days per use, and that's kind of how first edition functioned with a lot of abilities. In this one, it's a stance, so you can kind of use it all the time, and this lets you enter a judgment. So based on what we had talked about before, you're going to pick a calling when you first select your first level in Inquisitor, and that's going to give you a whole bunch of different things. That you're going to get your starting judgment. You're going to get a lot of different abilities based on that. You're going to get a spell, not a spell. You're going to get a skill that you're going to be trained in. You're also going to get your starting edicts and judgments. We're going to get into that in a minute. So you get this stance called Divine Precept, and so long as you're in this stance, you get a +1 to your attack bonus. It's a status bonus. So at some point, this is going to have conflicts with some spells, since most spells grant a status bonus if they're giving you +2 attack. But that's not a big deal. I mean, you're getting this at first level. They have a key ability score of strength or dexterity, kind of whichever one you choose. So when you pick your calling for your Inquisitor, you're going to get a couple of different things. You're going to get an edict, which sometimes gives you a passive benefit that is, sometimes it's always on. Sometimes it's only on when you're in your stance. Sometimes it has a trigger. And you're going to get a judgment. It's something that you can enter when you enter your stance. There are multiple different judgments you can get. There is even a way that you can kind of take a class feat and kind of harken back to another calling to get a second judgment. But keep in mind, unless you take certain abilities, you're only going to have one judgment active. So sometimes one judgment's better than another judgment because just the situation and the monsters you happen to be fighting at the time. Maybe one gives you pluses to your saves like we talked about before that first edition got, and sometimes maybe you get bonus damage based on your wisdom modifier. Next interesting calling that we're going to talk about is the calling of Absolution. It actually gives you trained in deception, and it also gives you a special feat that is for Inquisitors called the Pliable Principles. And it also gives you, like I said, it gives you edict, it gives you your judgment, and this basically improves your feint ability and actually gives you a new success and critical success for your feinting ability that can supersede your normal feint or the normal feint's success and critical success. So it kind of leans into the idea that you're using your deceptive abilities, and maybe you're putting higher points into charisma for this, and you're using your deception to be able to lie and get into those organizations a bit better. But there are other edicts that really don't even focus on deception. They focus on other abilities. So how the callings work is you get a base judgment and a base edict at first level. And at 7th level, and they all have a 7th level ability and a 15th level ability. So as you gain more power as you get higher and higher levels as an Inquisitor, your calling will improve over time. These add spells to your spell list above and beyond the normal ones that you would get for your spell casting. Remember, as a spontaneous caster who uses the limited spell casting that Secrets of Magic introduced, the bounded spell casting, you have very limited spells that you know. So adding any spell to your spell list above and beyond that is always going to be a benefit. And the level 15 ability, called Consecrated Edict of Penitence, basically lets you, anytime you enter your stance or use Follow My Lead, which is something that is quite interesting and we're going to get to in just a minute, you can faint for free as a free action, which is really good. But yet again, we're at 15th level, so we've seen other characters at higher levels be able to do stuff for during free actions. So this is not, anything out of the ordinary. And there is a number of different callings that you can pick from, and they give you all the different abilities that they would grant you. Going back to the first edition book, the one other thing that book introduced, and that the Inquisitor really kind of honed in on, was the introduction of teamwork feats. Now, that's something that Pathfinder 2nd edition hasn't really gone back to, but they kind of pulled this idea back into the Inquisitor, to where the Inquisitor can use some of their abilities to grant their friends actions that they can take that are based on their Inquisitor abilities, saying, go for the eyes, or, take cover. And that would give sometimes reactions that your friendly other characters can take, or actions that they can take upon their turn. And there are certain abilities that the Inquisitor can get to improve this effect. Just like the Summoner, they're going to get unlimited signature spells, so they can always upcast all their lower level spells if they decide to keep them. And they get a standard slew of abilities: general feats, skill feats, skill increases, the kind of standard fare increases into their attack and to their spell DCs, increases to their the saves, and all that good stuff. Yeah. So when you pick your calling, you're going to get a first level Inquisitor feat, similar to how the clerics don't get a first level feat, but based on their doctrine, they get one of 2 feats that they get access to. So if you're playing a human Inquisitor, then you can be able to gain a second one of these feats, but normally you're only going to get one of these feats based on the calling you choose. So now we're going to talk about focus spells. Now, the interesting thing is that the Inquisitor has focus points, but they do not have focus spells. They use focus points in a different way than other classes do. A lot of shouts and a lot of the abilities that the Inquisitor has the invocation subline. Now, what that does is, let's take the feat Stand Tall. Stand Tall feat gives you, you shout encouragement to your allies so that your ally may not waver. The target ally gains a +2 status bonus against attempts to shove or trip them until the beginning of your next turn. They also gain this bonus to saves or anything that would cause them to fall prone. So that is a 1-action ability that they can do, and shouts have generally a range of 30 feet. And they basically shout at their friend in hopes that the enemy is not going to be able to trip them. So they get deep pluses to their defense to being tripped, and their saves on abilities that make them fall prone. But there's an invocation part of this. It says, to your feet. And the target ally can immediately save using their reaction to stand. The ally gains a +2 bonus to their AC against any reaction triggered by this move. So if you're already prone, and I spend, as the Inquisitor, a focus point to empower my shout from Stand Tall to your feet, then my friend ally is going to be able to immediately get up, and let's say the enemy that's standing next to them has attack of opportunity, and they're able to try to attack them because they took a move action. Well, they're going to get +2 to their AC bonus as they stand up, and that costs a focus point. So if I don't have a focus point, I can use the base level ability. But if I do have a focus point and I want to get it, I want to have my friends stand up so they don't have to waste an action on their turn, because I'm basically giving them the chance to reuse a new reaction to get up right now. So it costs me an action regardless, and in the other case, in the case I'm not spending a focus point, it gives them pluses to being knocked down, and then on the and being shoved. And then if they're already fallen down, I say, hey, get up, you, and then they have the ability to stand up. So some of these shouts don't have the invocation, and some of them do, and some of the other abilities do have invocation. So you can always use the base level ability if you don't have any focus points left. But you can use the focus point benefit as well. And some of these feats are teamwork feats where I give you the ability to use an action on your turn that you normally wouldn't have access to. So another, let's see, we're going to 4th level and go, let's see, we're going to go for the eyes. So this feat is a one action activity for the Inquisitor. And you instruct an ally to go after the opponent's eyes or other sensory organ until the end of the target's next turn. They gain the blinding strike teamwork action. Now it kind of describes what teamwork actions are, but you can only ever benefit or have someone else benefit from one teamwork action. You can't hand out 3 actions to 3 different people. It'll be a little bit much. So they limit it to where if you give a teamwork ability out, that's the only one you can give out. If you give another one out, it kind of negates the first one. But the Blinding Strike Teamwork feat is a 1-action ability. And spurred on by the Inquisitor, you do as you are asked. Make a ranged or melee strike. It gains the following success, and critical failure effects. On a critical success, the target is blinded for 1 round and dazzled for 2. On a success, they're dazzled for 1 round. On a critical failure, you fumble the attack so badly that you lose your coordination with the Inquisitor and have to regroup with the Inquisitor. You cannot use any strikes with the teamwork trait until you've refocused or spent 10 minutes with the Inquisitor, kind of refocusing your teamwork efforts. Then you have simple ones like this is another 4th level ones I found interesting is 2 arms. And we've seen other classes have, when you roll initiative, you are able to do something. So this one is 2 arms, and it's a free action when you roll initiative. When you're about to roll perception for initiative, specifically perception, you warn your allies of the impending danger. You and one chosen ally of your choice may draw a weapon. So immediately say you were kind of caught unprepared. The Inquisitor sees the bad guys, 2 arms, and you and someone else can just pull out your weapons and be ready for combat. So I really do like the idea that the Inquisitor taking a bunch of these teamwork feats and being able to really widen out the ability nature of the group, because sometimes that you have your big burly upfront fighter, and this is not what the Inquisitor is, but sometimes you have the really upfront fighter, but he's not in the greatest position to do what is needed right now. And sometimes there's another character over there that maybe doesn't have as high a hit, or maybe doesn't do as much damage, but they're the perfect position to do the perfect thing that we need right now. But I, as the Inquisitor, who's built to do it, I'm too far away as well. So I can say, hey, you over there, can you do this for me? And they're going to get a special action. Now they can choose to take the action. They can choose not to take the action. But yet again, we're playing a cooperative game. And if they feel it's tactically sound, that they like, yeah. And this isn't one player ordering another player around, but this is just being able to widen the gamut of my character does these actions, and then, okay, well, the barbarian does those actions, and then the wizard does these actions. And not to say a lot of these involve strikes, so you're not going to have some of your characters that are not built for melee or range striking to do these. But it's still nice to be able to, like, well, I'm just going to do kind of I have my standard abilities that I use in combat, but it's nice to be able to, like, someone grants me the ability to do something cool. And that, I really think that was really pulled from the idea of the teamwork feats that were pulled from 1st edition that really kind of make this class one of its own. And it's nothing really like this in current Pathfinder 2nd edition. So I mentioned that you're going to get a judgment and an edict from your calling, but all Inquisitors are going to get a second judgment. And this kind of, yet again, harkens back to first edition. I'm going to keep referencing first edition, where a lot of Inquisitors, I wouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them wanted to focus in on doing non-lethal damage. That was very much a common practice for Inquisitors, especially good Inquisitors who didn't really want to kill a lot of people. I mean, we're adventurers, we kill people. But some Inquisitors really wanted to focus in on doing the non-lethal damage in first edition. And the kind of way that we've kind of mirrored that here is that all Inquisitors get an edict of arbitration, and their judgment lets them do non-lethal damage without taking a penalty. So normally if I have a lethal weapon and I'm trying to do non-lethal damage, I take a penalty to my attack because I'm trying to hold back, or I'm trying to hit him with a certain part of my sword, and it makes it less efficient, so it's harder to hit. We have this judgment here that lets us switch off and say, okay, I'm going to be able to do non-lethal damage and without any penalty. But your calling also gives you a judgment as well. But you remember, as I said before, you can only have one judgment at a time. So the Inquisitor is able to take certain feats if they kind of want to focus on the idea of switching the judgment back and forth. It is an action to, and it's an interact action, so they can be attacked if someone has attack of opportunity. To switch a judgment of whatever judgment is the right judgment for that given moment. So sometimes I need it to hit right now because the thing's really tough and it's really hard to hit. And other times I'm getting hit with a lot of saves, so I might need to switch to the one that gives me a bonus to saves. So as you level up, you're going to pick feats that are going to give you access to multiple judgments, but you only have to have one. You can only have one up at a time. But then you have things like Swift Judgment. So normally it's one action to just swap your judgment while you're in your stance. You can go, okay, I'm in judgment A, now I'm going to switch to judgment B. So normally that's an action. I have to spend an action to swap from one to the other. But then if I really am into this idea of switching back and forth, whatever judgment meets the environment that I'm in right now, I can take at 6th level Swift Judgment. So it's a one action activity, and I evaluate the guilt and dispense punishment quickly and efficiently. Stride or strike, and then I'm allowed to change my judgment, or I can change my judgment and then stride or strike. So it kind of lets me get a little bit of the action economy that some of the other classes have, but only if I really want to be the one that's switching the judgment a lot of different times. And it is a flourish, so you can't keep doing this. So you can't keep gaining the action economy. Just like a lot of other classes, action economy move gains flourish. And here's the one that I really thought was interesting. And this kind of goes back to sometimes the Inquisitor is willing to take on the burden of the party and really be the one, the idea of the paladin or the champion sacrificing themselves for others. Sometimes Inquisitor can be a little selfish because they have a directed mission. I have a mission. I need to stop these bad people, but they also working in a team group. So and the fact that they have these teamwork feats really get the sense of there's times where you really want to be focused on your one mission, and there's other times where you're focused on saving your friends. So we have at level 8, the feat Save Yourself. It's a reaction, and the trigger is your result of the saving throw that would deal damage to you and one other person. So this is most likely an area of effect spell that's affecting you and at least one other person. And you have rolled a failure or better. And you're only allowed to do this once per day. You draw upon your faith to shield your allies at your own expense. You treat your saving throw as one step worse than you've rolled. And one ally is allowed to re-roll their saving throw and use the better result. This is a fortune effect, meaning you can't use another fortune effect on this, meaning they can't use the hero point to re-roll. This is gaining them the re-roll. And it also has the invocation of up to 4 allies can re-roll their saving throws and use the better result. So that does cost a focus point. So this is kind of like a spell. That is also an 8th level feat. So I really do like the idea of having the Inquisitor in 2nd edition I think there's a really nice spot that the Inquisitor fills that doesn't feel like it's just on the champion. It's not a full spellcaster, so it doesn't step on the toes of the Oracle or the Cleric. And it really has its own niche, but it also harkens back to the old first edition days of having that, that badass Inquisitor in your group, just kind of walking through people and judging them for their wrongdoings. So, yeah. I think that's it. I think this is a good product. We're going to put a link down to the description below to where you can get this. It's on Drive-Thru-RPG. Like I said, it's by Attune-A-Wizard Press, by TJ Ellis and Reese Shaw, the authors. So I really think that this is and Tina is having fun playing the character. I like a lot of the different options and powers that you get, and you can really focus in on really getting your, multiple different judgments and kind of swapping back and forth, or you can kind of focus in just giving your teammates the ability to do special actions that they wouldn't normally take, or they get benefits for taking certain actions. You can kind of empower them with your judgment for a short time. Or you can kind of take a smattering of a little bit of everything. Get more judgments, get more edicts, get more teamwork feats, shouts, yell at your enemies, yell at your friends, yell at everybody. But yeah. So this is Steve from Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed. May all your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. Later.